Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Linux After Dark. I'm Joe.
I'm Chris.
I'm Gary.
And I'm May.
Welcome back all. I recently saw quite a hot take from Zach on Mastodon. Linux users will hate to hear this, but no one cares that you're running Linux, and you shouldn't either. Your operating system is a passive gateway to your apps and services. Linux is still cool, but it shouldn't be the focus.
Is that not just tree? That's not a hot take at all. Next.
I think it's a pretty hot take.
So, I mean, in a lot of ways, yes, but in a lot of ways, no, because we still have issues with hardware support and stuff. Like, if you say your operating system is just a portal to apps, and then you're running BSD, well, your portal's kind of useless, isn't it? That might be the hotter take.
I want this to be what things are like, but they're just not. So I run Debian stable and XFCE because I don't want things to change, but that's just hiding. And things do change and break. We were just discussing, Joe, you've had Pipewire shoved under your feet and it's caused you problems. Things just change. You can't stay still. The problem is this also describes proprietary operating systems to a degree. That's why people like them. macOS just you turn on and you use it and it gets you to your apps and services.
Except that just before we started recording, I clicked onto YouTube and Luke Miani, I think that's how you say it, his channel is all about Apple stuff. And his latest video is about how buggy and shit Apple operating systems are now.
Well, that's basically my point. If you go down that route, it's crap. And if you go down our route, it's crap.
Software is just buggy. The more experience you have with software, the more you find its bugs. I don't think it's anything specific to anyone.
Yeah. I think what Zach got wrong here is the word is. And what he should have said was, your operating system should be a passive gateway to your apps and services.
But we are a specific niche and there are other niches, right? People like running Nixos because they are the opposite of this. We like to use the computer to do the thing, and I'm sure they do too, but they really love crafting the thing too. And I don't care. I like the fact that I can fix things by popping the hood of the car, but I'm not going to spend all weekend with my sleeves rolled up around my elbows. I don't care enough.
Leave me alone.
Yeah, Gary likes to fix his knackered old Fiat.
But that's it, isn't it? Like, I like to know that the plumbing is there. I like to get into the plumbing of it, but that is not the forefront of my experience. I want to forget about the plumbing 95% of the time, and only if it springs a leak do I want to care. But not everyone is like that. Some people love the Lego aspect of the plumbing itself.
No, I think you're right. We are people who just want to turn on the computer and open Audacity and record a podcast, or open Firefox and browse the web, or open a BitTorrent client and retrieve our DVD backups, right? We're not people who want to spend hours crafting our experience or customizing our i3 window manager. We just want to turn on the computer and use it. And I guess I'm the prime example of this, right? I daily drive a Mac. I like to mess with a Linux machine every now and again, but by and large, the software I'm using on those machines is the same, or is web-based, or is something that is on another computer somewhere else.
Yeah, but I get the feeling that Zach here and other people who would agree with this are probably GNOME users, where you can't really change much without extensions. Whereas I like to get my Ubuntu desktop, and I don't like to tinker with it for hours, but I like to spend about 10 minutes setting it up, moving the panel to the bottom where it should be, setting up my various launchers and stuff like that.
Setting the wallpaper to black. Yeah, we get it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to do some customization. So it's not just a pull. It's not like I just do a fresh install and I just get going. I just sign into my various things and get going. I like to do a little bit of tweaking to make it my own.
But then I'm a GNOME user, and I also do some tweaking to make it my own. I turn on the minimize and maximize buttons. I install the dash to dock extension. I install the Window is Ready notification mover extension because someone at GNOME thought that it was a good idea to just not open the window when I click on a link for some reason. I guess that's a similar amount of customization to you do, but from then on, I'm just using my applications. I don't spend endless hours tweaking with it or changing CSS or modifying themes or finding the latest and greatest wallpaper changing extension or whatever it might be. I set it up once, I leave it, and I have Firefox and Audacity and VS Code and Spotify and the other software I use in the dock. And that's about it.
So I don't want to be that girl or anything, but are we maybe reading a little bit too much into 150 characters?
No.
If I could edit this, I think I would change it. Instead of should be, I would say my operating system is my passive gateway to my apps and services. So I want to refine it to a certain point, but then if someone turned around and said, and made it so passive that it didn't feel like it's something I wanted to use in the way I like to use it, I would be annoyed. But this was part of a longer thread about immutable operating systems and a reaction to the discussion around things like Silverblue and everything.
Well, yeah, and this link to George Castro's video, Why Universal Blue Images Strive to be Distroless. That's probably the context that we should have led with here.
Yes, this is true. This is the problem. It's almost too open to interpretation, this, as a statement, because this is why I don't click with things like Nix. Maybe because I do this in my job. Infrastructure as code and endless YAML files and definitions. At 5 o'clock in the evening, I don't want to sit down and start crafting a YAML file for my leisure desktop operating system. And I know you don't have to do that. There's a very good teams of people that curate something that you can then use. But that doesn't work for me either. I want to be the annoying person that George feels like is the old paradigm. I want to poke with sudo and break it. And that's my fault and that's my responsibility. But I can see why it's a problematic model. I've just seen someone again break Python 3 in Ubuntu on a Reddit thread by touching the system level Python, having moaned that Python was distributed as something they couldn't touch, and they tried to be forced to use a virtual environment, which is very important, and they overrode all of that. And reading the thread was just, he's done everything which this is meant to protect against, overridden the managed environment setting, completely messed up the system level version of Python, and now can't use the apt package manager. There's no way out of this situation, is there?
All right, hot take. I don't think OSTree is actually that good, and I certainly don't like it.
Why is it the future of the Linux desktop then?
I don't think OSTree specifically as a technology is it. Because one of the big reasons why we want to do all of this, putting together system images for people, is for the performance of you have this single binary that you have on the server, and they have this single place to put it on the client, and it's as simple as SCP from one to the other. This massive Git-like file tree and storage and everything seems like a lot of work, and indeed it is slower sometimes than just extracting the packages from, say, Ubuntu. And I don't think that's a very good paradigm for us to get into. Like, I know when my framework is upgrading because the fans kick on, which is the only time they do it. And I know when my Surface Go is upgrading because it's completely unusable.
I've got to say, more recently, this frame of thinking has entered my head as I'm sitting in front of my machine, because where I've settled at the moment is to install very little user space graphical applications, very few user space graphical applications from the repositories, because I'm running Debian stable. And if it's not in backports, you've got to have some maneuverability. The more you do that, the slower it is to update your system, even on my most modern laptop. And I sit watching Flatpak pull OSTree, and I think, this is quite slow, isn't it? And like quite intensive. And yes, I don't really get the fan spin on the very latest laptop, but on the previous one, I did. And I don't love it. It allows me flexibility to run newer things, but it is a bit slow.
Well, I had this very issue today with the Flatpak of Chrome on Fedora. I'm using a lower powered machine at the moment, and using the Flatpak of Chrome on a audio/video call, I was getting all sorts of weird audio artifacting. Then I restarted Chrome and it wouldn't recognize the microphone. I switched to the RPM of Chrome and I had none of these problems. So I agree with you, Chris. I think there are still some performance issues to work out. Now, whether Flatpak was trying to do an update in the background of Chrome or what it was, I don't know, but it worked fine in the RPM.
Two difficult ones I had recently was the Minecraft launcher corrupted a JSON in its OSTree layer and had to fix that. And if we go back a little further, the Firefox Flatpak wouldn't honor my custom DNS for my WireGuard tunnel and use my Pi-hole to resolve local domains. And when you go bug hunting for that stuff, it's quite annoying because you go to a GitHub repository for a Flatpak package, and sometimes it will be in the Flatpak packaging, or sometimes it will be in the upstream packaging. And then you get into this whole political thing of, don't raise that issue here. It's not my problem. It's not my problem either. Well, it's your problem. Well, you're the one repackaging it. You're doing this. And you just, just turn the computer off.
I'm inclined to agree on the performance stuff. I was trying out Bluefin recently on my X270, which is a bit long in the tooth now. And updating it took longer than I would like, to be honest. And just generally, performance felt a bit sluggish compared to Ubuntu that I normally run on it. Like, I'm sure if you've got a super fast machine, it's all fine. But for a shit old machine, it feels like too modern or something.
Well, I guess this goes back to your comment a couple of episodes ago, Joe, where you said that developers should be made to test the code on something that isn't their development workstation.
Yeah.
And for me, I've really been feeling that when I've stepped back to even a slightly older machine for the past few days. Everything just feels that little bit unoptimized, and I can't put my finger on it. And it's not that this is a sluggish machine by any means when running most stuff, but there are just certain things where you think you never had a machine that was more than a year or two old in mind when you built this.
Yeah.
So, to be clear, I think that some of the newer technologies, like ROFS for read-only images that actually like memory align and stuff, that's a cool technology. I think that's going to be exciting coming up. And doing a bunch of those instead of doing OSTree seems a lot more useful and performant. So I look forward to that being the solution that we're using, and I think that this bootable containers thing is similar to that. Though bootable containers is a rough name for it.
It is, especially given that it's not necessarily even about containers.
Right. It's taking these container images or OCI images and putting a kernel and stuff in them and a bootloader that understands how to boot into them, which that both is and is not a groundbreaking new thing.
Well, and it's not a bloody container, is it? If it's got a bootloader and a fucking kernel in it, it's an operating system, not a container.
Well, Lexi would like to argue with you.
Yeah, and it's using container paradigms to do the build and maintenance of those, whatever you want to call them, bootable containers, I suppose, for want of a better term. So I think it's a noble idea. But again, is it solving a problem that most people have? I'm not quite so sure. Maybe it works really well in a cloudy type world. But again, I don't have people coming and shouting at me saying that it's something they want.
But as George would say, the Linux desktop has failed. Here we are, like 20 plus years of Ubuntu, and still there's like how many people using it? Maybe like 20 million, maybe. Probably not even that, versus the billion people using Windows. And so we need a new approach, don't we, if we're going to get normal people using Linux?
Only the other day at work, we were discussing, one of my colleagues has a Ubuntu installation for gaming. And he said, it keeps breaking even though I deliberately don't do updates. And we were talking around the subject, and then I was like, but every time you open Steam, you get a progress bar and things have updated. And they have an implicit expectation that everything around it has updated. And if you keep ignoring Discover when it's saying update, you're going to get so out of sync with what it expects that it's going to break. But then the retort to that was, yeah, but if I run the updates, things break, and then I spend ages fixing them.
Well, if you will run KDE.
Well, but then I was helping my niece the other day. I was syncing down a WireGuard tunnel some installation files from my house to her house. on a Windows machine, and I was getting pitiful download speeds. And I was like, is there a problem with the connection? I was troubleshooting. I looked in the task manager of Windows. It was running Windows Update. And even though I was doing smart queue management on the connection, it was giving a huge chunk of the traffic to this Windows Update process. And as soon as I rebooted the machine, I got the full line speed for all of the transfers. So this is the problem. Whether you want it to not change and have full control, and that leaves you with security issues, or whether you go all the other way, and whether it's Windows, macOS, Chrome OS, Bluefin, Silverblue, well, this just needs to happen in the background and people shouldn't worry about it and they just get on with using the computer. It just feels a bit overly utopian. I think it's great if we can pull it off, but it doesn't feel like we can at the moment.
We should throw all of the computers into a volcano.
Well, this leads me to a hot question that I've got, right? And that is, why is it never clear to me whether I'm going to have to reboot or not until I cat var run reboot required? Because when I do updates via the command line, I see, oh, right, it's doing a kernel update, so that probably means I'm going to have to reboot. And it's literally 50-50. Sometimes you have to, and sometimes you don't. And like sometimes it's just the kernel firmware, and like, does that mean I'm going to have to reboot? Am I just thick, or is there no rhyme and reason to this, at least in Ubuntu?
There is rhyme and reason, but the rules are a little different than you expect. So yeah, kernels require a reboot.
But sometimes they don't.
What?
I swear sometimes I get a kernel update and it doesn't require a reboot.
That's not possible.
Is it just not writing to the file?
That sounds broken because you can't, unless you're kexecing, and that's not set up by default in Ubuntu, you got to reboot. And even then, you got to take down all your services to kexec.
So here's a question for you, May, because I've never really fully understood it. I watch it go by. Multiple times in an update, the init ramfs will be rebuilt and it will have the name of the kernel. Is that possibly what Joe is seeing, and what's going on there?
So there's that too. What Debian packages are supposed to do is defer that and just say, I want the init ramfs updated. But some of them don't and explicitly do it during their installation. Mm-hmm. So you end up with it being done multiple times, which takes forever. It also really annoys me. But yes, if you're updating the init ramfs or anything in it, then yeah, you would require a reboot in order to have that software running. glibc, if that gets updated, you need a reboot because it's linked into everything and you're not going to be able to take down everything because your PID1 is part of everything. NSS modules, same thing because glibc. And I think those are the big ones. Linux VDSO, if that gets updated for some reason. There's rhyme and reason to it. There are some things that could definitely be optimized, but yeah, if you're getting a kernel update, like the actual kernel is changing on disk, and it's not like, okay, time to reboot, then that sounds like a bug.
Or is it? I've just realized that I've got Ubuntu Pro on a couple of machines. Is it that is confusing me?
Live patch, perhaps, yeah.
I have no idea if it's that smart.
Is it live patching the kernel and saying, no, don't worry, you don't have to reboot?
Usually that changes your message of the day to say, hey, there are patches, but you should reboot anyway.
Right.
Well, I guess this comes on to a hot take that I have, is that we should just stop hiding this stuff from users. If the kernel's been updated, whether it's live patched and therefore is running in memory or not, it should still update that reboot required flag, in theory, right? Because you still need to reboot to boot into that kernel and make sure that hardware support isn't broken or whatever else. And there are many, many other things that are just now hidden away in a secret control panel or a config file or a registry setting or you have to press Alt while you click this button to get the advanced settings.
Honestly, I don't know what the implementation there is. Maybe it does interact with Ubuntu Pro. I'd say that more research is required.
I'm like alien to all this now because when I used to run Ubuntu Mate, there was a graphical software updater application. Depending on your settings, it would pop up and say, updates are available, it's time for a reboot. And as you say, May, when you SSH into an Ubuntu server with the default settings, it has that big message of the day, What's the CPU usage? How much RAM is in use?
What's the advertisement we wanted to advertise to you today? Yeah,
exactly. How brilliant snaps are, all the things I love. But then I don't really see that when I'm running Debian because I've done a minimal install and then just installed XFCE. There's no graphical updating application.
I'm just going to buy you a "By the way, I use Debian" t-shirt, Chris.
Look, I'm not saying...
You mention it every episode.
Yeah.
We have a Slack channel at work called Random for users of our system. There's thousands of them. And someone popped up the other day and said, I'm installing desktop Linux for the first time. What should I install?
Uh-oh.
What do you think I said?
Chris said, "By the way, I use Debian."
No, I didn't mention it at all. Obviously, I'm not going to say that to people. Yeah, I said install Linux Mint or one of the flavors of Ubuntu, or try Ubuntu if you like GNOME. But here's a couple of links. But I'm not on an advocacy program for it. It's just because I'm a grumpy old bastard increasingly. Like, stop popping up telling me to reboot my computer. Stop telling me there are updates available. Just leave. My operating system is my passive gateway to my apps and services.
Yep, and that's exactly what all the Arch and Nix users said too, right?
No, but the difference is, Gary, the difference for me is that I'm not then putting my configurations on GitHub and putting screenshots of everything all the time going, isn't it brilliant how I've configured this? Because my response to those posts is always, what are you doing with it? What are you doing? Like, that's a computer. Brilliant. Now what are you doing with it?
You don't do that anywhere on Reddit because you do it here. This is an intervention.
Well, we've been talking about this for far too long, so we should probably wrap things up. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Chris.
I use Fedora.
And I'm really confused.
See you later.